Discover the incredible moment a CEO realized the touching sacrifice of his maid on his birthday. James Turner's birthday bash was the stuff of legends, a skyline view from the 50th floor of a glitzy Manhattan high-rise, laughter drowning the music, and toasts flowing like fine wine. Yet amidst this celebration, an unsettling emptiness gnawed at him, an itch that wealth and status couldn't scratch. The energy of the elite, the banking tycoons and tech moguls, actually felt invasive. He held his glass high, smiled in response to hollow laughter, yet his mind wandered, disconnected from the scene unfolding around him. The recognition felt shallow, and the praise felt rehearsed. Each slap on the back, each clink of glasses piggybacked a sense of dread, that his life of luxury was built on a shaky foundation of transactional relationships. Suddenly, James was overwhelmed. He slipped outside into the night air, where the city flickered like 1,000 stars below him. As he leaned against the marble railing, his gaze fell upon the bustling streets, but his heart weighed heavier. It was in this moment of solitude that James encountered Maria, his longtime maid, a loyal presence who often blended into the background. Tonight, however, she wore a mask of distress, her usually warm smile replaced by pinched lips and troubled eyes as she clutched her phone. "What's wrong, Maria?" he asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, her breath hitching as the weight of her words threatened to spill. "My daughter, she's not well." I just found out. Her voice trembled, the distress palpable. As she relayed the news of her daughter's illness and the financial agony that ensued, it felt like a punch to James' gut, a raw truth laying bare in the chilly air. For the first time, James glimpsed the world beyond his own. He realized this wasn't just a background player in his life. Maria carried burdens unseen. Her dreams of nursing dimmed further into the distance. Each day, she scrubbed floors and packed lunches for others. Stripped of his celebratory facade, James confronted a glaring moral dilemma. What had he built his success upon? Before he could respond, laughter erupted from inside. Its jarring cheer felt like a world away from their solemn conversation. His colleagues, the very people he thrived among, represented the apex of achievement, yet they felt devoid of authenticity. Did they even know who she was? Fragments of doubt glimmered in his mind. Had he sacrificed connection for profit? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Calculated decisions and financial gains came with a hefty price. Solitude. In that moment, Maria laid bare her sacrifice, and a storm brewed within him. The laughter faded into a muffled backdrop as he stood before a festering shame. Here was a woman pouring her heart into her children while he padded his bank account with insignificance, chasing wealth and recognition like a moth to a flame. As the shimmering skyline sparkled like a mirage, he felt an undeniable urge to stand up for her. Would his peers regard the revelation as a whimsical thought? Would they patronize him for humanizing someone they had overlooked for so long? The dichotomy of his life froze him in place, bringing forth a simmering eruption of fear. Now, with the choice looming before him, he knew he couldn't return the same man he had been. But the thought of speaking out rattled him. Would he find the words or retreat back into silence? A flurry of emotions crashed over him, and the decision that lay in wait held the promise of transformation or the risk of profound isolation. Would he leap into the unknown or remain shackled by the comforts of his high-rise world? James stood at the marble railing, an invisible barrier stretching out between him and the warm laughter echoing from within the high-rise. Maria's plight resonated like a distant drumbeat, refusing to fade into the background noise of celebration. He felt a sudden urge to confront the gilded cage he had built for himself. The realization sank in this moment was not merely about Maria. It was a confrontation with his own choices, his own shortcomings. Why had he let the superficiality of his lifestyle drown out his moral compass? Each promotion, each deal sealed with a handshake, had constructed walls around him, isolating him from genuine connections. The account of Maria's struggles illuminated a path he had deliberately ignored, a window into his own humanity, cracked but resilient. "James," Maria's voice broke through his reverie. "I'm sorry for burdening you with my problems. I just know—" "Don't apologize," he interrupted, driven by a surge of determination. "This is important. You're important." The conviction in his voice surprised even him. As she looked up, her eyes widened with a flicker of hope amidst her despair. Did he truly mean it? The notion sent a jolt through him, redirecting his trajectory. The decision to help her wasn't just an act of charity, it was an opportunity for profound personal growth. It felt as if he had cracked open a door to a space where empathy could flourish. But what exactly could he do? The questions clawed at him. He wasn't qualified to assist with medical bills or navigate healthcare. Yet, that didn't relieve him of the moral obligation he now felt weighing heavily on his chest. "What if I talked to some doctors? Maybe I could help you find resources," he suggested, each word struggling to escape the confines of his neatly organized corporate mindset. Maria's frown transformed, her expression softening. "That would mean a lot, but I don't want to impose." "No, you're not imposing," he asserted, feeling a surge of authenticity. "I've spent too long in this cocoon of privilege, forgetting the realities that people like you face every day. I want to overlook this." With every passing moment, he felt emboldened, carried by a tide of responsibility. The conversation shifted something deep inside him, the realization that success wasn't just about profit margins or stock prices. It was about uplifting others, sharing burdens, and forging genuine connections that mattered. As he contemplated the risk of vulnerability, the laughter from inside flowed harshly, reminding him of the isolation he had chosen. He understood then that this was a critical fork in his journey. He could slip back inside, continuing with the superficial banter, nodding along to the mundane, or he could forge a new path, one steeped in purpose, however frightening. James turned back to Maria, urgency burning within him. "Let us meet tomorrow, okay? I'll do my best to help your daughter. I want to wait for someone else to step in." The acknowledgement felt empowering, casting aside the fears that had whispered to him for years. Maria's eyes glistened with a combination of gratitude and disbelief. "You don't know how much this means." It was true, he didn't know the full extent yet. But as they spoke under the glimmering skyline bathed in city lights, he recognized that this journey was just beginning. This was his chance not only to help Maria but to redefine his own principles, his identity. But doubt lingered at the edges of the inspiration blossoming within. The potential backlash he would face in the corporate world loomed large in his mind. Would his peers view this as a weak move? The stakes were rising, and with them, the fear of isolation grew louder. Could he maintain his integrity in an environment that thrived on exploitation? The decision to pursue authenticity was not one he could take lightly. It rippled with uncertainty. The question lingered, could he really break free from the gilded cage he had built and submerge himself entirely in this newfound commitment? The implications of his choices stretched before him like an unfurled horizon, shrouded in uncertainty but brimming with potential. What lay ahead would demand courage he wasn't sure he possessed. And as the celebration continued inside, James felt the stirring of a deeper purpose, a change fueled by empathy and a promise he made. But a storm of confrontation was brewing. The impending challenge lay just beyond the door. He was readying himself to face whatever revelations awaited him. What he didn't yet comprehend was how transformative this leap would be, for himself and for those around him. As dawn crept through the edges of his apartment, James woke to a day heavy with purpose. The events of the night before replayed in his mind, fusing resignation with determination. He fixed his gaze out the window, half expecting to witness some divine signal affirming his new mission, but there was only the city, sprawling and indifferent beneath the sun. His first instinct upon rising was to retreat back into the comfort of his corporate role. to immerse himself in spreadsheets, conference calls, and the familiar clatter of the office environment. Yet as he shuffled about his kitchen, preparing a hasty breakfast, Maria's plight loomed large, not as a burden but as the catalyst for his transformation. He had seamlessly blended into a life where people were either allies or adversaries, and compassion had long been reserved for blips in his calendar charities, fundraisers, but never genuinely. With a conscious breath, he recalled the sincerity in Maria's eyes. It sent shivers through him. This was not merely a moment of selfless charity, it was a chance to redefine his ethics, a way to rip off the mask he had worn for years. The image of his colleagues flashed in his mind. He imagined showing them this side of himself. What would they say if he became an advocate for someone who didn't fit into their predefined boxes? The question churned uneasily in his stomach. At the office, a sea of familiar faces washed over him as he entered, the usual morning chatter echoing through the hall. But today, it all felt incongruent, a hollow melody dancing about while his core resonated to a different beat. Instead of engaging in the quick banter and exchanging pleasantries with his coworkers, he took a moment, leaning against the elevator wall, to reassess who he had become. The pressure to conform weighed on him. How could he bring up his new commitment to help Maria without inviting judgment or derision? He envisioned his boss's dismissive smirk, the questions that would follow had he lost his edge. Had he become soft? Awash in doubts, James nonetheless made a decision. It was time to face those fears head-on. He would voice his intentions at the next team meeting, not as an admission of weakness, but as a point of strength, showcasing the individuality that had never been his strong suit. He had spent a lifetime in a rat race obsessed with success. Perhaps it was time to craft a new definition of success, one that embraced vulnerability. The meeting room was sterile, every surface reflecting the corporate ambitions of the company. As the discussion turned to quarterly projections, James's palms became slick with sweat. This was it. Would he risk his standing for something more significant? The tension spiraled within him like a whirlpool, threatening to pull him under. In a moment of clarity, he raised his hand. Silence fell over the room. "I wanted to share something personal," he began, his voice steady yet quaking under the weight of vulnerability. "I've recently become involved with a situation that has opened my eyes to the struggles many people endure daily. Specifically, I'm helping a woman and her daughter navigate some health issues. The collective surprise was palpable. Several colleagues exchanged curious glances, their expressions ranging from intrigue to skepticism. James pressed on, feeling the gravity of his words. "This experience has made me realize that our success is intertwined with the struggles of those around us. We can't just be about profit margins, we need to nurture human connections." The moment hung thick in the air, charged with implications far beyond the usual quarterly metrics. Some faces turned soft, while others shifted into expressions of concern. Would they support him in this new endeavor, or would he become an outlier, highlighted for all the wrong reasons? The uncertainty of the corporate world curled around him, but he stood firm, a lone figure in the powerful sea of faceless ambition. Then, the tone shifted when Eric, his trusted colleague but staunch traditionalist, spoke up. "James, are you sure this is the right direction? Why risk everything on a personal issue?" The question stung, darting through his confidence. It echoed in his mind, drawn from a place of concern yet tinged with an undercurrent of judgment. Did he dare challenge the status quo, or would he retreat into silence, back to the sanctuary of indifference? Forced to confront his rapidly evolving identity, James realized the stakes had never been higher. Perhaps the first act of rebellion would be to defy the very expectations that sought to confine him. As the murmurs of discussion began to swirl anew, James steeled himself. His journey had only begun, but a broader confrontation loomed ahead. Not only would he have to confront his colleagues, but he would need to wrestle with the deeper fears that had taunted him throughout his life. He knew now that each day would demand more than just his presence. It would require his active engagement in both his life and the lives of others. There, in that unsuspecting conference room, he realized that his transformation would not only be personal, but educational, a meta-journey of discovery that intertwined with those he chose to uplift. But what lay ahead was a labyrinth of challenges, each more complex and demanding than the last. And as he left that meeting, an unsettling thought nagged at him. Would his effort be enough to withstand the backlash he anticipated from his peers? Or was this just the beginning of a fight he might not win? The following days were a disorienting blend of anticipation and trepidation for James. Each morning greeted him with the nagging weight of doubt. He felt like a tightrope walker striving for balance, acutely aware of the steep drop below. He spent his time at the office navigating conversations like a minefield, deeply aware that his colleagues had shifted their perceptions of him. The usual pleasantries seemed charged with unspoken commentary. He immersed himself in the work at hand, yet with each passing hour, he felt a rising urge to continue the dialogue sparked in the meeting. Though the metrics of success that had once defined him still loomed in the background, a new layer of complexity fluttered in his mind. Helping Maria and her daughter was quickly becoming more than a cause. It was reshaping his identity. Driven by this urgency, James dedicated his lunch breaks to poring over articles about advocacy and community support. He even found himself creating a list of small, actionable ways to infuse compassion into his corporate responsibilities. Yet, every time he dared articulate these ideas in conversation, the faces of his colleagues seemed to harden, as though he were attempting the impossible mixing oil with water in a corporate landscape that valued profitability above all else. One afternoon, while sitting at his desk avoiding work, he shot a quick message to Maria, updating her on a possible fundraiser he had brainstormed. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for an instant, the words sounding ludicrous in his mind. What if his colleagues laughed? What if they felt betrayed for daring to connect profit with real lives? "Your help is making a difference," she replied, a simple affirmation that lit a small flame of confidence within him. Compelled by her words, James decided to take a bold step. He would organize a small meeting, an initiative to discuss how their company might contribute to local community issues. This time, it wasn't just about vulnerability or risks. It was about engagement, about demonstrating how a successful business could drive positive change in tandem with its financial goals. But how to frame that idea? Would he frame it as beneficial for the company, or would he allow the human element to take center stage? Time moved fast as the day of the meeting approached. He spent countless hours crafting a presentation infused with statistics that underscored both the moral imperatives and corporate benefits of social responsibility. Yet, as the presentation date loomed, he wrestled with the troubling thought. Was he genuinely committed to this new path, or was he merely performing for the sake of a fleeting ideal? On the day of the meeting, he felt every muscle in his body coiled with tension. His colleagues gathered, a sea of familiar faces imbued with skepticism, curiosity, and indifference. As he stepped to the front of the room, he saw Eric's discerning gaze fixed on him, as if it were scrutinizing a science experiment destined to explode. "Thank you for being here," James began, his voice steadier than he expected. He laid out his vision, interweaving heartfelt stories of Maria and the vulnerable people he'd met along the way. Would they understand? Would they see the human in his argument? This was no longer just a cause, it was a redefinition of success itself. As he shared the data surrounding social impact, he noticed some expressions soften while others tightened, palpably resistant. The more he spoke, the more he questioned whether his colleagues would ever truly grasp what he had discovered. "I believe we can enhance our success by investing in our community," he finished, a sense of hope mingling with the dread of rejection. His stomach twisted as he awaited the response, the silence stretching like a rubber band, aching to snap. Then it happened. Eric leaned back, arms crossed, brow furrowed, and after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "But are we really equipped to go down this path? Isn't this just a distraction from our core objectives?" The familiar doubts resurfaced. Gnawing at the diligence of his newfound resolve, James knew that this was not just about convincing others. It was about building a body of courage to stand firm in the scrutiny of his own beliefs and choices. And as he prepared to defend his vision against the looming specters of doubt, he realized this was not merely a battle for acceptance, it was a deeper quest for authenticity. Would he have the tenacity to face disillusionment, regardless of the stakes? Caught amidst the storm of contrasting ideologies, the real struggle was just beginning. The question remained, could James transform his convictions into a lasting impact, or would he forever remain an outsider in a world that demanded conformity? The clock ticked, and soon he would have to confront the true cost of his desire to evoke change within the company. James stood at the front of the room, grappling with Eric's challenging question. The air felt thick with skepticism, an almost tangible barrier between him and his colleagues. It would have been easy to retreat, to abandon this new path as just another ill-conceived venture, yet he felt a flicker of determination igniting within him. Perhaps this was the moment that would shape not just their company, but his own evolution. He took a breath, the silence weighing heavily on him. I understand your concerns, Eric. But if we continue to focus solely on profit, we risk losing sight of who we are. A company is not just its bottom line, it's the impact we make, the relationships we build. There was an unfamiliar gravity to his words, a resolve buoyed by the sincerity of his mission. A few heads nodded, and he noticed Lisa, usually indifferent, leaning forward.
What do you propose?
She asked, curiosity illuminating her expression. It felt like a crack in the hardened exterior of the room. Let us start with small initiatives, he suggested, quickly finding momentum in his thoughts. Perhaps we could partner with local schools or shelters. A mentorship program for professionals to share their skills. Mentoring may sound good, but who manages it? This sounds like added work for an already stretched team. The voice belonged to Tom, always a gatekeeper of the status quo. James felt frustration bubbling up, battling against the earnest desire to remain constructive. I could lead this. I'm more than willing to invest my personal time outside of work, he replied, passion elevating his tone. It was a bold claim, one that wrestled with the traditional confines of his job, a calculated risk that could fracture the foundation he'd spent years building. The room shifted slightly, but the pushback was palpable. Discomfort rippled among his peers, and he recognized it as resistance to change, cloaked in practicality. He needed to shift their focus away from logistics and toward purpose. Imagine a workplace where our team connects their skills to real lives, fostering both internal growth and community enhancement. His words hung in the air, leaving space for reflection. Yet doubt crept back in. Were his colleagues even capable of envisioning this? He wrestled with the thought again, both excited and terrified that he might be leading them into uncharted territory, possibly fracturing his professional relationships in pursuit of an ideal. As the discussions continued, he felt empowered by the engagement, but he was also keenly aware that he had awakened something volatile. Would they want to champion this endeavor? Or would this meeting amplify the fissures, revealing how deeply split their values were? As the hours passed, a mix of tentative enthusiasm and apprehension fueled the conversations. Ideas flowed, some practical, others far-fetched, as people began to contemplate a potential transformation. Yet lingering hesitations attached themselves to the air like smoke, reminding James that the road ahead would not be smooth. He left the meeting with a sense of purpose, but it came at a cost. He'd put forth his most authentic vision, but it exposed him to mutability and discord. Questions of loyalty and acceptance gnawed at him. Would his colleagues find a way to embrace this vision, or would they push back even harder, forcing him back into familiar constraints? Later that evening, he flicked through messages on his phone, one in particular catching his attention, another text from Maria. It sparked a reminder of the stakes he was foregoing for a broader mission. Change takes time, she had written. You're planting seeds. But were those seeds a long-term strategy, or could they just as easily choke under pressure? The tension solidified within him. He had skated across a divide, sensing the potential for both dissension and collaboration. Challenges awaited. Would he embody the change he envisioned for the company, or would he remain just an outlier? As he stared out the window at the fading horizon, the uncertainty felt palpable. The moment for decisive action was drawing near, and soon he would have to confront the true identity of the leader he aspired to be. What would become of his efforts if everything he'd risked began to unravel? The ticking clock ceased to tick slowly, Now it raced towards an inevitable decision that would reshape everything. In the following days, the echoes of the meeting reverberated through every corner of James' mind. Each interaction with his co-workers now felt charged with unspoken potential, layered with anxiety and hope. He quickly recognized he wasn't just advocating for a new initiative. He was challenging a deeply ingrained mentality that prioritized growth over humanity. The real test came when he entered a conference call with Tom and Lisa, among others, to brainstorm actionable steps towards one of the proposed initiatives. As they began to dissect ideas, the resistance James felt at the initial meeting came rushing back. Tom's rigid tone dominated the conversation. We need to keep our focus. Not every idea is feasible, and honestly, mentorship is a distraction from our core tasks. James felt a tightening in his chest. He had come to this call with renewed strategies, but now he sensed the old belief that change could threaten their stability was rearing its head once more. It wasn't just Tom. The hesitation in Lisa's voice as she mentioned budget constraints illustrated a wider anxiety. The old guard was resisting the new. Can we reconsider what mentorship truly brings? James interjected, his voice unwavering. Yes, it adds time, but it also builds skills within our team. A mentorship program could enhance morale and foster loyalty. Yet as he spoke, he recognized an uncomfortable truth. He was still predicting outcomes based on idealism rather than pragmatism. Were his colleagues so wedded to their routines that they could not see the merits behind his vision? As he mulled this over, the conversation shifted. Lisa proposed a more structured approach, urging for metrics to evaluate success and align with quarterly goals. Slowly, James began to notice the delicate shifts in the room. The conversation became less about dismissal and more about refining. Could he guide them to a middle ground where his vision retained its essence while still appearing palatable to their traditional sensibilities? He allowed himself to entertain the thought. Maybe he needed to ground his proposals in the realities others cared about. Rather than petitioning for an expansive mentorship program, could he suggest pilot projects with measurable outcomes? Let us test the waters, he suggested, heart pounding at the vulnerability of the idea. How about we implement a trial mentorship pairing with one local school? We can start small, hypothesize the outcomes, and if it proves valuable, we can scale. The room fell silent, and James took a breath. He was negotiating the terms of his vision, but he hadn't given up on it entirely. There was a chance he could transform skepticism into collaboration, but it would mean he had to balance ambition with realism. As the discussion moved forward with this new direction, a flicker of possibility ignited within him. This was a step, albeit small, in his transformation as a leader. He could be driving change without torching his relationships in the process, thus owning his role as both innovator and collaborator. However, that evening, as he left the office, doubt swirled again. Had he compromised too much? Was this genuinely progress, or merely a concession that would undermine the core of what he wanted to achieve? The arrive home only intensified his tumultuous feelings. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he couldn't help but reflect on the true nature of leadership as he scrolled through a mix of quotes and motivational posts. A leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. But what if the thought struck him fiercely, he didn't yet know the way? What if he had to confront the harsh truth of his shortcomings before he could truly lead others? Just then, a surprising message popped up on his phone, one that had him utterly captivated. It was from Maria again. Change doesn't just stand on principles, James. Sometimes, it takes uncovering what's hiding beneath the surface. What could she possibly mean? He thought of the hidden fears not just of his colleagues, but of his own lurking uncertainties. He had been focused on navigating external change, but what internal changes awaited him? Tomorrow, he would have to dive deeper not just into his colleagues' hesitations but into his own heart. What truths about his leadership, his motivations, and his vision lay buried waiting for discovery? As that spark of realization ignited, he felt the urgency of the journey he'd begun. The next step loomed larger than any before. What would he uncover when he dared to confront the layers beneath? The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow in James' bedroom. He lay awake, restless thoughts swirling in his mind like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. The weight of yesterday's discussions pressed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had glossed over something vital, something hidden both within himself and among his colleagues. With determination, he pulled himself out of bed, resolving to dissect these feelings before confronting anyone else. After a quick shower, he settled at his kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, and grabbed his journal, hoping clarity might emerge through the process of writing. He began to jot down his thoughts, starting with a painful admission. He was scared. Scared of failure, scared of not being heard, and most importantly, scared that he might be inadequate as a leader. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, yet he still felt like an imposter in this role of changemaker. Suddenly, the realization struck. Could it be that his hesitance to advocate more strongly for his vision stemmed from an unwillingness to confront his imperfections? Perhaps he feared that the very act of leading required more authenticity than he was ready to embrace. He was tackling external challenges, but neglecting his internal landscape. James pressed the pen to the page, determined to pierce through the superficial. What genuine motivations drove his initiative? A desire for recognition? To fulfill a long-forgotten dream of making a tangible difference? Or was it rooted in his own upbringing? A landscape filled with mentors who shaped him but remained unseen in the company. The tension in his chest eased slightly as he laid his mind bare on paper. This reflection, however, offered little solace. He needed to articulate his vision in a way that resonated with his colleagues, not from a place of abstract ideals, but from authentic experience. As the day unfolded, he reflected on Maria's message. Uncovering what lay beneath the surface wasn't merely about his colleagues' fears. It was about revealing his vulnerabilities. Perhaps he could use his own journey as a narrative bridge to connect with their apprehensions. With this in mind, James decided to bring a personal touch into his next conversation. They were all individuals shaped by experiences, each harboring hidden anxieties and aspirations. If he could present mentorship not only as a company initiative, but as a cornerstone of their shared experiences, would they be willing to engage? By lunchtime, he found himself in yet another meeting with Tom, Lisa, and others to discuss the proposed mentorship program. Instead of launching straight into strategies, he took a deep breath and decided to lead with transparency, a risky maneuver. "I want to share something personal," he began, feeling the weight of the words. "Growing up, I was fortunate to have mentors who guided me through pivotal moments. They shaped my perspective, and I believe we can create that same opportunity for others. I know change is daunting, but perhaps we can see this not as an add-on but as an essential part of who we can be as a team." His voice slightly wavered, but as he spoke, he noticed hints of curiosity igniting in the eyes of his colleagues. This was not just business. It was humanity at its core. Tom's initial skepticism seemed to soften, and a new dynamic emerged. Lisa tilted her head, now listening with an open curiosity. Encouraged, James pressed on. Could he finally turn the tide of their apprehensive attitudes, combining their experiences with the initiative's potential? Moments later, Maria's earlier words rang in his mind. Uncovering what lay beneath was now a journey he was inviting his colleagues to take alongside him. James realized he hadn't just been leading a charge. He was uncovering layers of connection both within himself and among his team. As the meeting ebbed, unanswered questions lingered. He had taken significant strides, but would this newfound vulnerability translate into momentum for the initiative? And what deeper truths lay beyond the connection he had just started to forge with his coworkers? As he stepped out into the brisk afternoon air, a fresh thought ignited. The moment had arrived not only to confront hidden layers, but to forge ahead past his fears and into the potential of true collaboration. What awaited him on the horizon could unlock pathways he hadn't yet dared envision. But as he began to imagine the possibilities, a nagging doubt crept in. Would they embrace this path, or would he inadvertently stumble upon more resistance within himself? The journey had only just begun. The fresh air invigorated James as he walked away from the meeting with a mix of hope and apprehension. The conversations with his colleagues had awakened a new dimension within him, a sense of purpose that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Yet the conversation with Tom and Lisa had only peeled back the surface. Doubts clung stubbornly to his thoughts, like shadows refusing to recede. He headed back to his office, his pace brisk, contemplating the balance between his evolving vision and the practical steps necessary to make it a reality. The challenges ahead loomed large, and with every step, he wrestled with the possibility of failure. Was he ready to lead authentically, to be more vulnerable than he had ever been? Once settled at his desk, he faced a blank screen. Reflection had been easier when he was writing in his journal, the pen providing a tangible connection to his thoughts. How could he replicate that experience on the keyboard? He needed to find a way to articulate his vision, something that resonated not only from his personal journey, but also pointed towards mutual goals collectively shared by his colleagues. Doubt nudged at his thoughts, reminding him of the skepticism expressed earlier by his team. James considered their perspectives carefully. What if they remained unswayed? If he failed to engage them on a deeper level, would he risk alienation instead of unification? He couldn't let fear dictate his approach. He must yield to the potential outcome of that vulnerability instead. He took a deep breath and started typing, weaving elements from his personal story into a shared narrative, creating an outline for a presentation that was more than mere bullet points. Each section bore scars of his past lessons learned through mentorship that shaped his leadership style. Would his own story resonate sufficiently, or would it come across as mere sentimentalism? Midway through his writing, a notification pinged on his phone. It was a message from Maria. Just checking in. How are you feeling about the mentorship program? Her inquiry prompted him to reflect on how her earlier challenge had changed him. Perhaps being seen as a leader also meant inviting insight and honesty from others. The risk of vulnerability could create a bond stronger than any corporate strategy. He quickly typed a reply, sharing snippets of the conversations from that morning and how his own fears had somehow evolved into hopes. He found encouragement in composing his thoughts. What had felt like a daunting monologue now emerged as a collaborative dialogue, one that could potentially inspire others even more than some grand strategy. Then, without thought, he sent her an invitation to meet. The decision was impulsive, fueled by a desire for honest feedback, a chance to discuss the tangible next steps for the mentorship initiative, and perhaps redefine their partnership in the same vein of vulnerability that had begun to take root. Commitment to this path was becoming less about idyllic aspirations and more about actionable steps. It wasn't enough to want change. They needed to mold it together, to venture into those hidden spaces and compel one another to embrace their respective fears. The clock ticked toward the end of the day as he awaited her response. Anxiety twisted in his gut, but the tension was mingled with anticipation. Would this be the opportunity to clarify his thoughts with her invaluable perspective? As he looked out the window, the dusky hues of the setting sun ignited a warmth within him. This was a chance not just for him to lead, but to learn and adapt in tandem with his team. A moment of truth was on the horizon, and he felt the gravity of the choices he was about to make. But just as a wave of determination washed over him, another thought emerged, a flicker reminding him that true leaders are not merely agents of change, but also products of their own transformations. Would facing his fears yield the support he needed, or would it expose deeper divides that he wasn't prepared to confront? With each passing second, James sensed the stakes rising. He had invited uncertainty into his life, and the looming question remained: would they embrace this journey together, or would his newfound depth of connection crumble in the face of unexamined resistance? The sound of the notification jolted James from his contemplation. It was Maria's response, an enthusiastic, "I'd love to meet. How about tomorrow afternoon?" The prompt acceptance washed over him like a balm, easing some of the tension that had built throughout the day. Yet, beneath that relief, a more profound pressure began to settle in. His thoughts spiraled back to the presentation he had started drafting. It was time to refine his approach. Hosting a discussion felt revolutionary, but it also posed an undeniable threat to his confidence. Would he be able to navigate the complexities of his team's doubts while simultaneously unveiling his own vulnerabilities? The prospect was daunting, yet equally compelling. Each hesitation forced him to confront the essence of his leadership. Desperate for direction, James returned to his outdated notes, a collection of ideas, half-formed missions that had gathered dust over time. Flipping through the pages, he was struck by the duality of his expectations, the yearning for transformative collaboration against the haunting specter of rejection. He tapped his fingers against the desk, wrestling with the knowledge that authenticity required not just courage, but also a connection unpolished and raw. Morning light filtered into his office, illuminating both the chaos of his desk and the clutter in his mind. With help from Maria on the horizon, he needed to ensure that their meeting didn't merely result in surface-level understanding. What was the unspoken bond he hoped to forge? Collaboration born from shared fears could substantiate a true shift in their professional dynamics. But would that be enough to bridge the divides? As he prepared for their meeting, an impulse gripped him, the urge to pen a personal note to his team, something that would not only convey his vision but also lay bare his apprehensions. Tentative at first, James narrated his journey, detailing those intricate moments where fear battled with determination. He sought to expose the fragmented pieces of his story, not to garner sympathy, but as a means of forging a relatable foundation. He crafted each sentence carefully, allowing his vulnerabilities to weave through the fabric of his intended connections. As he hit send, his heart pounded heavily in his chest. What would they make of his honesty? The risk of exposing his uncertainties stirred a mix of excitement and trepidation. There was no turning back now. James stared at the screen, feeling the tension electrify the room around him. The clock ticked toward the afternoon meeting. Expectations danced in his mind, intermingling with doubt. Would his team respond positively, or would his revelations lead to surprise and confusion? Time blurred as he navigated his emotions, vacillating between optimism and dread. He reevaluated whether authenticity could be a catalyst for unity or if it might lay bare cracks in their cohesion that he had yet to recognize. The hour approached, and with it came a rush of hopeful determination. In those moments of waiting, James was transformed, acknowledging that true leadership needed more than just aspiration. It required an unwavering commitment to understanding and empathizing with those he guided. Just as the workday came to its climax, Maria entered the office. The warmth of her smile drew him in, but beyond the initial comfort lay a churning sea of questions. "Are you ready to dive in?" Maria asked, her gaze steady and inviting. The weight of their shared responsibility hung in the air, yet as James prepared to speak, he felt a profound truth beginning to take shape within him. He realized that embarking on this journey wasn't merely about leading. It was about inviting others to walk with him through uncertainty. He took a breath, ready to share the journey ahead, yet another thought surfaced. Would he truly have the courage to pull back the curtain on his own vulnerabilities as he faced their judgments, or would fear rear its head once more, threatening to unravel everything he had begun to build? The moment had come to confront not just his teammates' doubts, but his own hidden fears about leading in such an intimate way. What profound discoveries awaited them, and more importantly, could this pivotal moment mark the turning point in both his leadership journey and his personal evolution? Days turned into weeks as James and Maria diligently worked on the mentorship initiative they had envisioned together. Each meeting further ignited the spark of authentic connection amidst the corporate jungle. The atmosphere was charged with a renewed purpose. Colleagues began to share their own stories, building a tapestry of shared vulnerability. It was a remarkable shift, and lengthening shadows of doubt slowly faded into hopeful clarity. James attended the latest meeting, an air of anticipation electrifying the room. He focused intently on the faces surrounding him. Tom, Lisa, and Eric were all present, but there was something different about their expressions. They displayed an openness, a willingness to engage with the concept James had been advocating. The changes were palpable. He had begun to see the fruits of their collective labor, and they were dynamic. "Can we collectively define what success would look like for this program?" James posed, his voice filled with confidence. Those once hesitant faces nodded and leaned in. He could feel their engagement building momentum. The conversation unfolded, rich in ideas and perspectives. They outlined objectives that transcended profitability, connecting their mission to the heart of community development. They debated the integration of skills training, emphasizing the importance of mentorship as a pathway for nurturing young talent in the local area. Suddenly, it became more than just an initiative. It was a representation of their redefined values. After the meeting concluded, the room buzzed with renewed camaraderie. James felt a profound sense of accomplishment. He had navigated resistance with grace and perseverance, transforming skepticism into collaboration. Colleagues approached him, not merely as co-workers, but as allies, risk-takers willing to shift the paradigm. Here was recognition not from power or prestige, but from shared vision and humanity. As James reclined in his chair, he drew a deep breath, flooded with a sense of fulfillment that he had long thought unattainable. Leaning back, he reflected on how he had evolved. The isolation of his previous life seemed like a distant memory. He had stepped outside his comfort zone, and that choice had reshaped his professional landscape. The culmination of their efforts came at a company-wide gathering. His once fearful heart now thrummed with purpose as he prepared to present the mentorship initiative to the entire organization. With each PowerPoint slide, he captured not just statistics, but an emotionally engaging narrative. Maria watched from the audience, a beacon of inspiration. This was the drive for change he had sought, one rooted in empathy rather than profit. As he neared the end of his presentation, he saw heads nodding, eyes lighting up. The moment was exhilarating. Ignoring the fear of judgment, he bared his own story, recounting the journey of vulnerability he had embarked on, how it had fueled a commitment to uplift those around him. He spoke about Maria's dreams and struggles, weaving them into the fabric of their corporate identity. Harnessing our community impact signifies our own growth. It confirms that we are not separated by success. Instead, we are united by our ability to uplift each other, he concluded, his voice resonating with newfound authority. And in that moment, under the gaze of a supportive audience, James Turner realized he had not only let go of the shackles of superficial success, but had also constructed an empowering legacy rooted in genuine connections. As applause erupted, it washed over him like a wave of validation. Echoes of appreciation enveloped him. This achievement was not only practical, but profoundly personal. He had demonstrated that true leadership was not merely about steering a ship. It was tightly woven into understanding the tides of those aboard. After the applause faded, Maria approached him with tears of warmth glistening in her eyes. "You did it, James. You really did it." He smiled back, his heart swelling with joy. "We did it, Maria. I couldn't have done this without you or the team." In that shared moment of authentic recognition, they both realized they had not only transformed themselves but had become catalysts for others, a ripple effect of change that extended further than either could have imagined. James took a deep breath, radiating solid confidence. He felt established, not just as a leader but as a compassionate human being willing to dismantle the barriers that kept him and others from real connections. He conquered the internal struggles that once bound him. He stood now as a proud advocate for change, embodying the very principles of integrity and empathy he wished to see in the corporate world. "Change begins with one brave step," he whispered to himself. The journey, however, remained a perpetual evolution, an ongoing commitment to nurturing connections, empowering others, and redefining success as a shared endeavor. And so, James Turner continued his journey, fully aware that the most profound achievements are born when individuals dare to embrace their own humanity. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the transformative stories that unfold next. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep inspiring narratives alive. Share your reactions and theories about this conclusion in the comments below. Let's keep the convo going. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful journey of personal growth and connection.